Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I've been driving cross-country hauls for about 7 years now. It's decent money and I like the solitude. The radio keeps me company, and the road stretches out like a promise of somewhere new. But there are nights when the highway feels less like freedom and more like a trap you can't escape from. This happened last November, somewhere between Amarillo and Albuquerque. I was hauling refrigerated goods, which meant I couldn't stop for long. The schedule was tight, and the company tracked everything through GPS. Every minute counted. It was around 2 in the morning when I saw him, just standing there on the shoulder of I-40, thumb out, wearing a heavy coat that looked too big for his frame. The headlights caught him for maybe 3 seconds before I passed. Normally, I don't stop. Never have, never planned to. But something made me glance in the side mirror. He was still standing there, perfectly still, watching my truck disappear into the darkness. I should have kept driving. I had every reason to, but there was something about the way he stood there, so alone in the middle of nowhere, that made me feel guilty. I slowed down, argued with myself for a solid 30 seconds, then pulled over onto the shoulder about a quarter mile ahead. The air was cold when I rolled down the window. I could see my breath. The desert at night is a different kind of empty. It's not just quiet. It's like the world has been erased, and you're the only thing left. I waited. He appeared in my side mirror, walking slowly but steadily toward the cab. His hands were in his pockets, and his head was down like he was watching his feet. When he got close enough, I finally got a good look at him. He was maybe in his 40s, pale with dark circles under his eyes. His hair was greasy and hung in thin strands across his forehead. He smiled when he reached the door. "Appreciate it," he said. His voice was soft, almost polite. "Where are you headed?" I asked. "West," he said. "Doesn't really matter where. Just west." I hesitated. Something in my gut told me to say no, to tell him I'd changed my mind, but he looked harmless enough. Tired, maybe a little rough around the edges, but harmless. I unlocked the door. He climbed in without a word, settling into the passenger seat like he'd done it 100 times before. He didn't smell great. A mix of sweat, cigarettes, and something sour I couldn't place. But I'd smelled worse. "Name's Keith," I said, trying to be friendly. He didn't respond right away. Just stared out the windshield as I pulled back onto the highway. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "I know." I laughed. "What?" I said I know. He turned to look at me, and his eyes were flat. Empty. "Your name's Keith. You're 34. You've been driving trucks for 7 years. You're from Pennsylvania originally, but you moved to Nevada after your divorce." My hands tightened on the wheel. "How the hell do you know that?" He smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You told me." "I didn't tell you anything." "Not yet," he said. The way he said it made my skin crawl. I wanted to pull over right there and tell him to get out. But we were doing 70 on a pitch-black highway. There was nowhere to stop. Nowhere safe. "Look, man," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it's not a game, Keith." He leaned back in his seat, his hands folded in his lap. "You're going to tell me everything. You just haven't done it yet." I didn't say anything. My mind was racing. I thought about my phone, but it was in the cup holder between us. I thought about the tire iron I kept behind the seat, but I couldn't reach it without making it obvious. "You're scared," he said. "I can tell. Your breathing changed. Your hands are gripping the wheel too tight. Get out." "Can't do that." He tilted his head, studying me. "We've got another 100 miles together. At least that's how long it takes." How long what takes? He didn't answer. He just stared at me with those flat, dead eyes. The next hour was the longest of my life. He didn't say much, just sat there, watching me. Every time I glanced over, he was staring. Not blinking, not moving, just staring. I tried turning on the radio, but all I got was static. I tried making conversation, asking him questions, anything to break the silence. But he only answered when he wanted to, and his answers never made sense. "Where are you really from?" I asked. "The same place you're going," he said. "What does that mean?" "You'll see." Around 3:30, I saw lights up ahead. A truck stop. I'd never been so relieved to see civilization in my life. I didn't care if he tried to stop me. I was pulling over and I was getting help. But as I got closer, the lights started to flicker. Then they went out completely. "They're closed," he said. "They're never closed." "They are tonight." I drove past. The parking lot was empty. Not a single car, not a single light. It looked abandoned, like it had been shut down for years. "What the hell is going on?" I said, more to myself than to him. "You're starting to understand," he said. "Good." I kept driving. I didn't know what else to do. My phone had no signal. The GPS was glitching, showing me in the middle of nowhere even though I was on a major interstate. And he just sat there, calm as anything, like this was all perfectly normal. "Why are you doing this?" I finally asked. "I'm not doing anything," he said. "You did this. You stopped. You let me in. You made the choice. I was trying to help you." "No," he said. "You were trying to feel better about yourself. You saw someone in need and you wanted to be the hero. But you didn't think about what I might be, what I might want. What do you want?" He leaned closer and I could feel his breath on my neck. It was cold. Unnaturally cold. "I want you to remember," he whispered. And then, just like that, he was gone. I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a stop on the shoulder. I looked around, my heart pounding in my chest. The passenger seat was empty. The door was still locked. He was gone. I sat there for a long time, trying to catch my breath, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But I couldn't. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. I drove the rest of the way to Albuquerque in silence. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. I just kept my eyes on the road and prayed that the sun would come up soon. When I got to the depot, I checked the passenger seat. There was a faint wet outline where he'd been sitting, like condensation, like something cold had been there. I don't pick up hitchhikers anymore. I don't care how alone they look. I don't care how guilty I feel, because I know now that some people aren't looking for help. They're looking for someone who'll stop. I've driven through Nebraska more times than I can count. It's flat, it's boring, and the only thing that breaks up the monotony are the truck stops scattered every 50 miles or so. You get to know them after a while. Which ones have the best coffee? Which ones have clean showers? Which ones you avoid because the food will wreck your stomach for the next 200 miles? But in all my years driving that stretch of I-80, I'd never seen the one I found that night. It was late March and I was hauling electronics from Omaha to Salt Lake City. The weather was unpredictable. One minute it was clear, the next minute I was driving through sleet that made the road look like glass. I'd been on the road for about 6 hours, and I was starting to feel it. My eyes were heavy, and my back ached from sitting in the same position for too long. I needed to stop. That's when I saw the sign. Big, bright, impossible to miss. Eddie's stop, next exit, fuel, food, rest. I didn't recognize the name, but that wasn't unusual. Truck stops change ownership all the time. I took the exit and followed the road for about 2 miles. The sleet had turned into a light rain. and the windshield wipers squeaked with every pass. The truck stop appeared out of nowhere. It was huge, bigger than most of the ones I'd seen in Nebraska. Bright lights, a full parking lot, rows of diesel pumps. There was a diner attached to the main building, and I could see people moving around inside through the windows. I pulled into a spot near the back and killed the engine. The rain had stopped, but the air felt heavy, damp. I climbed out of the cab and stretched, my joints cracking in protest. The place was busy. There were at least a dozen other trucks parked around me, and I could hear the low hum of idling engines. I walked toward the diner, my boots crunching on the wet gravel. Inside, the lights were fluorescent and too bright. The smell of coffee and fried food hit me as soon as I walked through the door. There were about 15 people scattered around the room. Most of them were sitting alone, staring at their plates or their phones. A few looked up when I came in, but no one said anything. I slid into a booth near the back and waited. A waitress appeared almost immediately. She was older, maybe in her 60s, with gray hair pulled back into a tight bun. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "What can I get you, hun?" she asked. "Just coffee," I said, "and maybe a burger." "Sure thing." She walked away and I pulled out my phone. No signal. That wasn't unusual out here, but it was annoying. I wanted to check the weather, see if the roads were going to get worse. The coffee came fast. Too fast. I'd barely put my phone down when she set the cup in front of me. I thanked her and took a sip. It was bitter, almost burnt, but it was hot, and that was all that mattered. I looked around the diner while I waited for my food. The other customers were still sitting in silence. No one was talking. No one was on their phone. They were just sitting there, staring. It was unsettling. The burger arrived, and I ate quickly. I wanted to get back on the road. Something about this place felt off. The air was too still. The people were too quiet. Even the waitress moved in a way that felt wrong, like she was gliding instead of walking. I finished eating and flagged her down for the check. "No charge, hun," she said. "What?" "No charge. Eddie likes to take care of drivers." "Who's Eddie?" She smiled again. That same empty smile. "You'll meet him soon enough." I didn't like that answer. I threw a $10 bill on the table anyway and headed for the door. The parking lot was empty. I stopped dead in my tracks. All the trucks that had been there when I arrived were gone. Every single one. Except mine. I looked around, my heart starting to pound. The lights were still on. The diner was still full of people, but the parking lot was completely empty. I walked quickly to my truck and climbed inside. My hands were shaking as I turned the key. The engine roared to life, and I threw it into gear. That's when I saw him. He was standing in the middle of the parking lot. Tall, thin, wearing a long coat that hung past his knees. His face was hidden in shadow, but I could feel him watching me. I didn't wait to see what he wanted. I floored it, the truck lurching forward. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I just drove. When I got back to I-80, I pulled over and checked my GPS. According to the map, there was no exit where I'd turned off. No truck stop, no Eddie's stop. Nothing. I've driven that stretch of road a dozen times since then. I've looked for that exit, I've looked for that sign, but I've never found it, and I hope I never do. Most drivers don't use CB radios much anymore. Everyone's got a phone, GPS apps that tell you where the traffic is and where the cops are hiding. But I'm old school. I like having the CB on, even if it's just background noise. There's something comforting about hearing other drivers out there, knowing you're not alone on the road. But sometimes you hear things you wish you hadn't. This happened about 2 years ago. I was hauling furniture from St. Louis to Phoenix, taking I-44 through Oklahoma. It was late October, and the weather was starting to turn. The nights were cold, and fog rolled in thick once the sun went down. I was somewhere between Tulsa and Oklahoma City when I first heard the voice. It came through the CB around midnight. The channel had been quiet for the last hour. Just static and the occasional trucker checking in with their location. But then, cutting through the noise, I heard it. "Help me." It was faint, barely audible. A woman's voice, soft and desperate. I turned up the volume. "Hello? You need help? What's your 20? "Nothing. Just static." I figured it was a fluke. Maybe someone keyed their mic by accident. Maybe the signal crossed with another channel. It happens. But then I heard it again. "Please, someone help me." This time it was clearer. She sounded young. Scared. "Where are you?" I said into the mic. "What's wrong?" "I don't know." Her voice cracked. "I don't know where I am. I'm in a truck. I can't see. Please help me." My stomach tightened. I looked around, but there were no other vehicles on the road. Just darkness and fog. "Okay, listen to me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Can you see anything? Any signs? Any mile markers?" "It's dark," she said. "I'm in the back. I can't get out. Please, you have to help me." "I'm going to help you," I said. "Just stay calm. Can you tell me what kind of truck? What's the company?" "I don't know. I don't know. He locked me in here." "Who locked you in?" "The driver." She was crying now. "He said he'd let me out, but he lied. He just keeps driving. I've been in here for hours. Please, please help me." I felt sick. My hands tightened on the wheel. If this was real, if someone was really trapped in the back of a truck, I needed to do something. But how? I didn't know where she was. I didn't know what truck she was in. "Listen," I said, "I need you to try and find something. Anything with a name on it. A company logo. A license plate number. Anything." "I can't see," she sobbed. "It's too dark. Use your phone. Turn on the flashlight." "I don't have my phone." He took it. I cursed under my breath. Okay. Can you hear anything? The road. Traffic. Maybe a siren." "Just the engine," she said. "And the road. It's bumpy. Like we're on a bad road." I scanned the highway ahead. I-44 was smooth here. Well maintained. If she was on a bumpy road, she wasn't near me. "What's your name?" I asked. "Sarah." "Okay, Sarah. My name's Keith. I'm going to help you. I'm going to call the police, and I'm going to—" The line went dead. "Sarah? Sarah, are you there?" Static. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. The dispatcher answered on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency?" "I just heard a woman on my CB radio," I said. "She says she's trapped in the back of a truck. She's been kidnapped. I don't know where she is, but—" "Sir, slow down. You heard this on a CB radio?" "Yes. She said her name is Sarah. She said the driver locked her in the back." "Do you have a location?" "No, I don't know where she is. She said the road was bumpy. That's all I know." There was a pause. "Sir, we'll look into it. Can I get your name and location?" I gave her my information and hung up. I didn't know if they believed me. Hell, I didn't know if I believed me. But I couldn't just do nothing. I kept the CB on for the rest of the night. I called out every few minutes, asking if Sarah was there, if she could hear me. But there was no response. Just static. Around 3 in the morning, I heard another voice. "You shouldn't have done that." It was a man's voice. Deep. Calm. "Who is this?" I said. "You shouldn't have called the cops." "Where's Sarah? What did you do to her?" He laughed. It was a low, cold sound that made my skin crawl. "She's fine," he said. "For now." "If you hurt her, you're what?" he interrupted. "You don't even know where I am. You don't know who I am. You don't know anything." "The police are looking for you." "No, they're not. His voice was smug. "They think you're crazy. They think you made it up. And maybe you did." "I didn't make it up. I heard her." "Did you? Or did you just hear what I wanted you to hear?" The line went dead. I didn't sleep that night. I drove straight through to Phoenix, and the whole time I kept glancing in my mirrors, waiting for headlights to appear behind me, waiting for that voice to come back on the radio. When I got to the depot, I checked the news. I searched for reports of missing women, kidnappings, anything that might match what I'd heard. But there was nothing. No Sarah, no truck, no driver. I don't know if it was real. I don't know if she's still out there, locked in the back of some truck, waiting for someone to help her, or if it was all just some sick game. But I'll never forget her voice, and I'll never stop listening. I don't usually stay in motels. Most of the time, I just sleep in the cab. It's cheaper, and honestly, it feels safer. You never know what kind of place you're walking into when you rent a room for the night. But after 18 hours on the road, I was exhausted. My back was screaming and my neck felt like it was made of concrete. I needed a bed. I was on US 50 in Nevada. That long stretch they call the loneliest road in America. They're not kidding. For hours, it's just you, the road, and the desert. No towns, no gas stations, nothing. But around midnight, I saw a sign. Oasis Motel, next exit. Clean rooms, vacancy. I almost didn't stop. Something about the sign felt wrong. The paint was faded, and the letters were uneven, like someone had hand-painted them years ago and never bothered to fix it. But I was too tired to care. The exit led to a narrow dirt road that wound through the desert for about a mile. The motel appeared out of the darkness like a mirage. It was small, maybe 10 rooms total, arranged in a single-story L shape. The lights were on, but they flickered, casting strange shadows across the cracked parking lot. There was one other car parked out front, an old sedan covered in dust. I grabbed my bag and walked to the office. The door was unlocked and a bell chimed when I pushed it open. The inside smelled like mold and cigarettes. There was a small desk with a dim lamp, and behind it, an old man sat in a chair, staring at a black and white TV that wasn't turned on. "Need a room?" I said. He didn't look at me, just reached under the desk and pulled out a key. Room 7. He slid it across the counter without a word. "How much?" I asked. "40, he said. His voice was dry, like he hadn't used it in days. I paid in cash and left. Room 7 was at the far end of the motel, tucked into the corner where the two wings met. The door was warped, and it took me a few tries to get the key to turn. When I finally got it open, I almost walked back to my truck. The room was small and outdated. The wallpaper was peeling, the carpet was stained, and the bed looked like it hadn't been changed in weeks. But I'd stayed in worse. I dropped my bag on the chair, locked the door, and kicked off my boots. I thought about taking a shower, but the bathroom looked even worse than the bedroom. The tiles were cracked, and there was a dark stain in the corner of the tub that I didn't want to think about. I decided to skip it. I turned off the light and climbed into bed. The mattress was lumpy, and the sheets smelled faintly of bleach, but I was too tired to care. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. That's when I heard the knocking. It was faint at first, 3 slow taps, like someone testing to see if I was awake. I ignored it, probably someone at the wrong room, but then it came again. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. I sat up and looked at the door. The peephole was dark. "Wrong room," I called out. No response, just silence. I lay back down, but the knocking started again. This time it was louder, more insistent. I got up and walked to the door, looking through the peephole. There was no one there, just the empty parking lot and the flickering lights. "Who is it?" I said. No answer. I opened the door. The parking lot was empty. The sedan that had been parked out front was gone. The only sound was the wind, blowing dust across the cracked pavement. I closed the door and locked it. My heart was pounding, but I told myself it was nothing. Just the wind, just my imagination. I got back into bed. The knocking started again, but this time it wasn't coming from the door. It was coming from inside the walls. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. I sat up, my eyes scanning the room. The sound was coming from the wall behind the headboard, like someone was on the other side knocking. "Hello?" I said. The knocking stopped. I waited, my breath caught in my throat. The room was silent. Too silent. I couldn't hear the wind anymore. I couldn't hear anything. And then I heard the voice. It was faint, muffled, like it was coming from far away. A woman's voice, soft and pleading. "Let me out." I jumped out of bed and backed away from the wall. "Who's there?" "Please," the voice said. "Let me out. I've been in here so long." "Where are you?" I said. "In the walls," she said. He put me in the walls. I felt sick. I didn't know if this was real or if I was losing my mind, but I couldn't stay in that room. I grabbed my bag, shoved my feet into my boots, and ran for the door. The parking lot was still empty. The lights were still flickering. I ran to my truck, threw my bag in the cab, and started the engine. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I looked back at room 7. The curtains were moving, even though the window was closed, and I swear I saw a hand pressing against the glass from the inside. I drove until the sun came up. I didn't stop, I didn't look back, and I never took that exit again. There's an unspoken code among truck drivers. You look out for each other. You warn each other about speed traps, bad weather, construction. You flash your lights to let someone know they're clear to merge. It's a community, even if you never meet face to face. But sometimes you encounter drivers who don't follow the code. Drivers who seem like they're playing by different rules. Rules you don't understand. This happened to me on I-70, heading east through Kansas. It was early February, and the weather was miserable. Snow flurries mixed with freezing rain, making the road slick and dangerous. I'd been driving for about 10 hours, and I was ready to find a place to stop for the night. That's when I saw them. 3 trucks, all driving in a tight convoy. They were maybe a quarter mile behind me, moving at the exact same speed, staying in perfect formation. I didn't think much of it at first. Convoys aren't unusual. Sometimes drivers team up to save on fuel or just for company. But something about this one felt off. For one thing, they were driving too close together. Dangerously close. If one of them had to brake suddenly, the others would have plowed right into them. For another thing, they weren't passing anyone. They were just following. I kept an eye on them in my mirrors. They stayed exactly where they were, never getting closer, never falling back, just following. After about 20 minutes, I decided to test something. I sped up, pushing my speed to 75. The convoy matched me. I slowed down to 60. They slowed down too. I picked up my CB radio. "This is Iron Horse, heading eastbound on I-70. Got a convoy behind me. You guys need something?" Static. I tried again. "Convoy behind me, you copy?" Nothing. I didn't like it. I decided to take the next exit and let them pass. There was a truck stop about 5 miles ahead. I'd pull in, grab some coffee, and wait for them to move on. But when I took the exit, they followed. All 3 trucks peeled off behind me, maintaining their tight formation. My stomach tightened. This wasn't normal. This wasn't right. I drove into the truck stop and parked near the front, under the lights. I watched my mirrors as the convoy pulled in behind me. They parked in a row, all 3 trucks lined up perfectly, their engines idling. No one got out. I waited. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. They just sat there, engines running, headlights on. I grabbed my phone and thought about calling the police, but what would I say? 3 trucks followed me into a truck stop. They're just sitting there. It sounded insane. I decided to go inside. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe they were just taking a break, same as me. The truck stop was nearly empty. A couple of drivers sat at the counter, nursing coffee and staring at their phones. The clerk behind the register looked half asleep. I bought a coffee and sat by the window where I could see my truck. The convoy was still there, engines idling, no movement. I was starting to feel paranoid. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe they were just drivers like me, trying to get through a long night. But then one of the trucks flashed its lights. Once, twice, 3 times. The other 2 trucks flashed back. I set down my coffee and walked outside. The cold air hit me like a slap, and the wind carried tiny pellets of ice that stung my face. I walked toward the convoy, my boots crunching on the frozen pavement. "Hey," I called out. "You guys need something?" No response. I walked closer. The windows of the trucks were tinted, and I couldn't see inside, but I could feel eyes on me. Watching. Waiting. I said, "Do you need something?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could hear the edge in it. One of the trucks revved its engine. A low rumbling sound that made my chest vibrate. Then the second truck did the same. Then the third. I backed away, my heart pounding. This wasn't right. This wasn't normal. I turned and walked quickly back to my truck. I didn't run, but I wanted to. I climbed into the cab, locked the doors, and started the engine. The convoy didn't move. I pulled out of the parking lot and got back on the highway. I checked my mirrors every few seconds, praying they wouldn't follow. They did. All 3 trucks fell in behind me, matching my speed, staying in formation. My hands were sweating and my heart was racing. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't outrun them. I couldn't fight them. I couldn't even call for help because I didn't know what I'd say. I drove for another hour, and they stayed with me the entire time. Never closer, never farther. Just there. Then, as suddenly as they'd appeared, they were gone. I blinked, and they were just gone. 1 second they were in my mirrors, and the next second the road behind me was empty. I pulled over onto the shoulder and sat there, shaking. I didn't know what had just happened. I didn't know what they wanted. But I knew one thing. They'd let me go for now. Every state has way stations. Most of them are active, manned by DOT officers who check your logs, your cargo, and your truck's weight to make sure you're legal. But some of them are abandoned, closed down, left to rot on the side of the highway like forgotten relics. I've seen a lot of abandoned way stations over the years. They're eerie during the day, but at night, there's something else entirely. This one was in Montana on I-90, about 30 miles outside of Billings. I'd driven past it 100 times, and it had always been closed. The building was old, the windows were boarded up, and the scale was buried under years of dirt and weeds. It was just part of the landscape. Something you noticed and then forgot about. But that night, something was different. It was around 1 in the morning, and I was hauling lumber to Spokane. The roads were empty, and the only light came from my headlights cutting through the darkness. I was tired, running on coffee and sheer willpower, and I almost didn't notice the way station as I passed. But then I saw the lights. The building was lit up. Every window glowed with a soft yellow light, and the parking lot was illuminated by a set of floodlights I didn't remember being there. There was a truck parked in front of the scale, and I could see people moving around inside the building. I slowed down, confused. The way station had been closed for years. Why was it open now? I thought about pulling in. Maybe they'd reopened it. Maybe it was operational again. But something stopped me. Something about the way the light looked. Too soft, too warm. It didn't look like fluorescent lights. It looked like candlelight. I kept driving. But the image stuck with me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. After about 10 miles, I grabbed my CB radio. "Anyone out there ever see the old way station on I-90 outside Billings open?" I asked. A voice crackled back. Older guy, sounded like he'd been driving for decades. "You talking about the one near mile marker 112? "Yeah, that's the one. That place has been shut down since the 90s, buddy. You feeling okay?" "I just drove past it," I said. The lights were on. There was a truck parked there. People inside. There was a long pause. Then the voice came back, quieter this time. "You sure about that?" "I'm sure. I'd keep driving if I were you. Don't look back." The line went dead. I didn't like that answer. I picked up my phone and did a quick search for the way station. There wasn't much information, just a few mentions on forums and trucker message boards. Most of the posts were from drivers who'd seen the same thing I had. Lights on, trucks parked, people inside. But when they'd pulled in to check, the place had been empty. Doors locked, windows dark. Like it had never been open at all. One post caught my eye. It was from a driver who'd stopped at the way station back in 2003. He'd pulled in, thinking it was operational, and walked up to the building. The door had been unlocked, so he went inside. He said the place looked like it had been abandoned mid-shift. There were coffee cups on the desks, half-eaten sandwiches in the break room, jackets hanging on hooks, but no people, no signs of life. He'd searched the building, calling out, but no one answered. He'd been about to leave when he heard a sound from the basement. A low, rhythmic thumping, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. He didn't go down to check. He got back in his truck and left. The post ended with a warning. "If you see that place lit up at night, don't stop. Just keep driving." I set my phone down and stared at the road ahead. My hands were gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles were white. I told myself it was nothing, just an old building, just a trick of the light. But then I saw the headlights. They were behind me, maybe a mile back. A single truck moving fast. Too fast. I watched it in my mirror as it closed the distance. It was gaining on me, its headlights growing brighter and brighter. I sped up, but it kept coming. When it got close enough, I could see it clearly. It was an old Peterbilt, beat up and rusted, with no company logo. The kind of truck you see in junkyards, not on the highway. It pulled up alongside me, matching my speed. I glanced over, trying to see the driver, but the cab was dark. Empty. No one was driving. I slammed on the brakes, my truck skidding as I fought to keep control. The Peterbilt shot past me, its taillights disappearing into the darkness. I sat there, my heart pounding, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I didn't know what I'd just seen. I didn't know if it was real, but I knew one thing. I wasn't stopping until I was out of Montana. Truck stop diners are pretty much all the same. Same layout, same menu, same tired waitresses who've been working double shifts since before you were born. You go in, you order something greasy, you drink bad coffee, and you leave. It's routine. Predictable. But there was one diner I stopped at in Wyoming that broke every rule. I was on I-80, heading west through the middle of nowhere. It was late April, and the weather was starting to warm up, but the nights were still cold. I'd been driving for about 12 hours, and I needed a break. My eyes were burning, and my stomach was growling. I saw the sign around midnight. Betty's Diner, open 24 hours. Best pie in Wyoming. I took the exit and followed the road for about a mile. The diner sat alone at the end of a gravel lot, surrounded by nothing but darkness and empty fields. It was a small building, the kind with a neon sign out front and windows that wrapped around the front like an old-fashioned railcar diner. There were a few trucks parked out front, and I could see people inside through the windows. It looked normal enough. I parked and went inside. The smell hit me first. Coffee, bacon, and something sweet. Pie, probably. The diner was warm and bright, and for a moment I felt relieved. It was exactly what I needed. I slid into a booth near the back and waited. The other customers were scattered around the room, most of them sitting alone. A couple of truckers at the counter. An older couple in a booth by the window. A man in a suit sitting by himself, staring at a cup of coffee. A waitress appeared almost immediately. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with blonde hair pulled into a ponytail. She smiled as she set a menu in front of me. "What can I get you, hon?" "Coffee," I said, "and whatever your special is." "You got it." She walked away, and I looked around the diner. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The place looked normal. It sounded normal, but there was something in the air. A tension, like everyone was waiting for something. The coffee came fast. Too fast. I'd barely had time to look at the menu before she was setting the cup in front of me. "That was quick," I said. She smiled again. "We aim to please." I took a sip. It was good, strong and hot. I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. The food came next, a burger and fries. It looked perfect. I ate quickly, not realizing how hungry I was until I took the first bite. About halfway through the meal, I noticed something strange. None of the other customers were eating. They were just sitting there, staring at their plates or their coffee. Not moving. Not talking. I set down my burger and looked around. The old couple by the window hadn't touched their food. The truckers at the counter were staring straight ahead. The man in the suit was still staring at his coffee. "Excuse me," I said to the waitress as she passed. "Is everything okay?" She stopped and turned to me, that same smile on her face. "Everything's fine, hon. Why do you ask?" "It's just, no one's eating." She glanced around the room, then back at me. "They're just taking their time. They haven't moved since I got here." Her smile didn't falter. "Maybe they're tired." I didn't like her answer. I pushed my plate away and stood up. "I think I'm going to get going. But you haven't finished your meal." "I'm not hungry anymore." I walked to the counter and pulled out my wallet. "How much do I owe you?" "No charge," she said. "What?" "No charge. Betty likes to take care of her customers." "Who's Betty?" She didn't answer. She just smiled. I threw a 20 on the counter and headed for the door. The other customers didn't move, didn't even look at me. They just sat there, frozen. I pushed open the door and stepped outside. The cold air hit me, and I took a deep breath. My truck was parked where I'd left it, and I walked quickly toward it. That's when I noticed something. The other trucks were gone. I stopped and looked around. The parking lot was empty except for my truck. But I'd seen at least 3 other trucks when I arrived. Where did they go? I looked back at the diner. The people inside were still sitting there, motionless. I got in my truck and started the engine. I didn't care what was going on. I just wanted to leave. But when I tried to pull out of the parking lot, the truck wouldn't move. The engine was running. The gears were engaged. But it was like the wheels were stuck. I tried again. Nothing. I looked back at the diner. The waitress was standing in the doorway watching me. She was still smiling. I felt panic rising in my chest. I threw the truck into reverse and floored it. The tires spun, kicking up gravel, and finally, the truck lurched backward. I didn't stop, I didn't look back. I drove until I found the highway, and I didn't stop again until the sun came up. When I looked at a map later, I couldn't find Betty's Diner. There was no exit where I'd turned off. No gravel road, no diner. It was like it had never existed. There are certain stretches of highway that feel haunted. You can't explain it, there's no logical reason for it, but you feel it the moment you enter. The air changes, the road feels different, and you can't shake the feeling that you're being watched. I-40 through the Texas Panhandle is one of those places. It's flat, empty, and desolate. The kind of place where you can drive for an hour without seeing another car. The towns are few and far between, and most of them look like they've been abandoned for decades. I've driven that stretch more times than I can count, and I've never liked it, but it's part of the job. You take the routes you're given, and you make the best of it. This happened last summer. I was hauling auto parts from Amarillo to Albuquerque. It was around 2 in the morning, and the road was empty. The only light came from my headlights, cutting through the darkness like a knife. I was about 30 miles outside of Amarillo when I saw the first overpass. It was old, crumbling concrete that looked like it hadn't been used in years. As I passed under it, something caught my eye. There was a figure standing on top of it. I only saw it for a second, but it was enough. A dark silhouette, standing perfectly still, looking down at the highway. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a homeless person, maybe someone whose car had broken down, but something about the way they stood there, so still, so silent, made my skin crawl. I kept driving. About 10 miles later, I passed under another overpass. And there it was again. The same figure, same posture, same stillness. I slowed down, my heart starting to pound. That didn't make sense. There was no way someone could have gotten from the first overpass to this one that fast. Not without a car, and I hadn't seen any vehicles on the road. I picked up my CB radio. Anyone else on I-40 westbound? You seeing anything weird? Static. I tried again. This is Iron Horse on I-40. Anyone out there? Nothing. I set the radio down and focused on the road. My hands were shaking. I told myself I was tired, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The third overpass appeared a few miles later, and the figure was there again. This time, I stopped. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that it was nothing, that I was just imagining things. But I pulled over onto the shoulder, grabbed my flashlight, and got out of the truck. The air was hot and dry, and the only sound was the wind, whistling through the empty plains. I walked back toward the overpass, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "Hello?" I called out. "You need help?" No answer. I reached the overpass and looked up. There was no one there. I swept the flashlight across the concrete. Nothing, no footprints, no signs that anyone had been there. I stood there for a long moment, my heart pounding in my chest. Then I heard it, a faint scraping sound, like something being dragged across concrete. It was coming from above me. I pointed the flashlight up and my blood ran cold. The figure was there, hanging upside down from the underside of the overpass, staring directly at me. I didn't wait to see what it would do. I ran back to my truck, threw myself into the cab, and floored it. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I drove until I reached Albuquerque, and even then I didn't feel safe. I've driven that stretch of I-40 since then, but only during the day, and I never stop at the overpasses, because I know now that some things are better left alone. One of the first things you learn as a truck driver is to stay alert. You watch the road, you watch the weather, and you watch the other drivers. Because out here, one mistake can cost you everything. But sometimes, The scariest thing on the road isn't a distracted driver or a patch of black ice. Sometimes it's something you can't explain. This happened about 3 years ago on US 95 through Nevada. I was hauling construction equipment from Las Vegas to Reno. It was late September, and the weather was perfect. Clear skies, light traffic, easy driving. I was about an hour outside of Tonopah when I first noticed the truck. It was a semi, pulling a flatbed trailer. It was maybe a quarter-mile ahead of me, moving at a steady speed. There was nothing unusual about it, just another truck on the highway. But then I started to catch up to it. I was doing about 70, which meant the truck ahead of me had to be going slower. I figured I'd pass it and move on. As I got closer, I noticed something odd. The truck wasn't weaving or drifting. It was driving perfectly straight, right down the center of its lane. Too straight, like it was on autopilot. I pulled into the left lane to pass, and that's when I saw the cab. It was empty. No driver. No one in the passenger seat. Just an empty cab, cruising down the highway at 60 miles per hour. I hit the brakes, my mind racing. That wasn't possible. Trucks don't drive themselves. Someone had to be in there. But as I pulled alongside the cab again, I saw it clearly. The driver's seat was empty. The cab was dark. There was no one there. I honked my horn. No response. I tried flashing my lights. Nothing. The truck just kept driving. Perfectly straight. Perfectly steady. I grabbed my CB radio. "This is Iron Horse on US 95. I've got a situation here. There's a truck with no driver. I repeat, no driver. Can anyone hear me?" A voice crackled back. "Say again." "There's a truck on US 95 with no one in the cab. It's just driving." "You sure about that, buddy?" "I'm looking right at it." There was a pause. "Maybe the driver's sleeping in the back." "The truck's moving." "Then maybe you're not seeing what you think you're seeing." The line went dead. I stared at the truck, my hands gripping the wheel. This wasn't possible. It didn't make sense. I decided to try something. I pulled ahead of the truck and slowed down, forcing it to slow down too. It didn't. The truck maintained its speed, and I had to swerve out of the way to avoid being rear-ended. My heart was pounding as I pulled back into the right lane. The truck passed me, still driving perfectly straight. I followed it for another 20 miles, trying to figure out what was going on. But there was no explanation. No logical reason for a truck to be driving itself down the highway. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the truck turned off. It took an exit for a small town I'd never heard of, and I watched as it disappeared down a dark road. I didn't follow it. I kept driving, and I didn't stop until I reached Reno. When I got there, I filed a report with the highway patrol, telling them what I'd seen. They said they'd look into it. But I never heard back. To this day, I don't know what I saw. I don't know if it was some kind of experiment, a glitch, or something else entirely. But I know what I saw. Every driver knows that shortcuts can be dangerous. They save you time, but they take you off the main roads, away from help if something goes wrong. Most of us avoid them. But sometimes, when you're running late and the pressure's on, you take the risk. I took a shortcut once. I'll never do it again. This was about 5 years ago, in northern Idaho. I was hauling paper products from Coeur d'Alene to Spokane. It should have been a simple run, about 40 miles on I-90. But there was an accident on the interstate, and traffic was backed up for miles. I was already running late, and I couldn't afford to sit in traffic for hours, so I pulled out my map and found an alternate route, a logging road that cut through the mountains. It added a few miles, but it would get me around the traffic. I took the exit and headed into the forest. The road was narrow and winding, barely wide enough for my truck. Trees pressed in on both sides, their branches scraping against the trailer. The pavement was cracked and uneven, and every bump made the whole truck rattle. But it was quiet, peaceful even. I rolled down the window and let the fresh air in. It smelled like pine and earth. I'd been driving for about 20 minutes when I saw the sign. It was old, weathered, and leaning to one side. The words were barely legible, but I could make them out. Private property, no trespassing. I hesitated. I didn't want to get in trouble, but I'd already come this far, and the GPS said this was the right way. I kept driving. The road got worse. The cracks turned into potholes and the trees grew thicker. The sunlight barely penetrated the canopy, and the forest felt darker, more oppressive. Then I saw the cabin. It was set back from the road, half hidden by trees. It looked old, abandoned. The windows were broken and the roof was caving in, but there was smoke coming from the chimney. I slowed down, staring at the cabin. Someone was living there. I should have kept driving. I should have minded my own business. But something about that cabin made me uneasy. I stopped the truck and got out. The forest was silent. No birds, no insects, just the faint crackle of the fire inside the cabin. "Hello," I called out. No answer. I walked toward the cabin, my boots crunching on the gravel. The door was ajar, and I could see a dim light flickering inside. "Anyone home?" Still no answer. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The cabin was small, just one room. There was a cot in the corner, a table with a single chair, and a fireplace with a fire burning low. But what caught my attention were the walls. They were covered in photographs. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all tacked up in neat rows, covering every inch of the walls. And they were all the same, pictures of trucks, my truck. I felt my stomach drop. I stepped closer, my hands shaking. The photos showed my truck from every angle, parked at truck stops, driving down highways. Some of them were recent. Some of them were from years ago. Someone had been following me. I heard a sound behind me and spun around. A man stood in the doorway. He was tall, thin, with hollow eyes, and a face that looked like it hadn't seen sunlight in months. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Who are you?" I demanded. "Why do you have pictures of my truck?" He didn't answer. He just stared at me with those hollow eyes. I backed toward the door, but he didn't move. He just stood there, blocking my way. "I'm leaving," I said. "You can't," he said. "Not yet." "Watch me." I shoved past him and ran for my truck. I didn't look back. I climbed into the cab, started the engine, and floored it. The logging road seemed to go on forever. Every turn looked the same. Every tree looked identical. I felt like I was driving in circles, but finally, after what felt like hours, I saw the main road. I pulled onto I-90 and didn't stop until I was back in Spokane. I never took a shortcut again, and I never went back to that logging road. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder if he's still out there, still watching, still taking pictures. Some exits don't lead anywhere. They're just there, relics of old plans that never came to fruition, roads that were supposed to connect to something but never did. Most of them dead end after a mile or two, leading to nothing but empty fields or abandoned construction sites. Exit 29 on I-84 in Oregon is one of those exits. At least that's what I thought. I was hauling frozen goods from Portland to Boise. It was mid-January, and the weather was brutal. Snow, ice, wind that made the truck feel like it was going to tip over. I'd been driving for about 6 hours, and I was exhausted. I saw exit 29 on the sign and almost didn't think twice about it. But then I noticed something. There was a light at the end of the exit ramp. A bright white light that cut through the darkness like a beacon. I'd driven this route dozens of times, and I'd never seen a light there before. Curiosity got the better of me. I took the exit. The road was narrow and steep, winding down into a valley. The light grew brighter as I descended, and I realized it was coming from a large building. A facility of some kind, surrounded by a tall chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. There were no signs, no markings, just the building and the light. I pulled up to the gate and stopped. There was a small guard shack, but it was empty. The gate was open. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the building. Something about it felt wrong. The way it was lit up, too bright, too sterile. The way the fence seemed designed to keep people in, not out. I should have turned around, but I didn't. I drove through the gate and parked in front of the building. The place looked new, almost clinical. The walls were smooth and white, and there were no windows. Just a single door at the front, unmarked. I got out of the truck and walked toward the door. It was unlocked. Inside, the building was even stranger. The walls were white and bare. The floors were polished concrete. There were no signs, no labels, no indication of what this place was used for. I walked down a long hallway, my footsteps echoing in the silence. Every door I passed was locked. Every room was dark. Then I heard the sound. It was faint, coming from somewhere deeper in the building. A low, rhythmic hum, like machinery running. I followed the sound to a set of double doors at the end of the hallway. They were propped open, and I could see a faint glow coming from inside. I stepped through the doors and froze. The room was massive, easily the size of a warehouse. And it was filled with trucks, hundreds of them parked in neat rows, all facing the same direction. They were all semis, all different makes and models, but something was wrong with them. They were too clean, too perfect. No dirt, no scratches, no signs of wear. It was like they'd just rolled off the assembly line. I walked down one of the rows, my heart pounding. I looked inside the cabs as I passed. They were all empty. No personal belongings, no trash, no signs that anyone had ever driven them. Then I saw mine. It was parked at the far end of the row, identical to the truck I'd left outside. Same color, same model, same company logo, but it wasn't my truck. It couldn't be. Mine was still parked out front. I walked up to it and looked inside. The cab was empty, but on the dashboard, there was a clipboard. I opened the door and grabbed it. It was a delivery manifest. My delivery manifest. The one I'd been carrying in my truck. I dropped the clipboard and backed away. This didn't make sense. None of this made sense. I heard a sound behind me and turned around. A man in a white lab coat stood at the entrance to the room watching me. "You're not supposed to be here," he said. "What is this place?" I demanded. "You need to leave. Now." "Not until you tell me what's going on." He didn't answer. He just pressed something on a device in his hand, and the lights in the room went out. I ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran, stumbling through the darkness, my hands outstretched, searching for the exit. I heard footsteps behind me, getting closer. I found the door and burst through it, running down the hallway toward the entrance. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I got in my truck, started the engine, and floored it. The gate was still open, and I drove through without slowing down. I didn't stop until I was back on I-84, my hands shaking, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I've tried to find exit 29 since then. I've driven that stretch of I-84 a dozen times, looking for it, but it's not there. The exit doesn't exist, but I know what I saw, and I'll never forget it.